months in a different church in a different part of the state. So if your home church would like to host one of these biblical activism boot camps, if you found it helpful, please email me, blaine@idahofamily.org, blaine@idahofamily.org. Let me know, and we'll talk about how we might be able to put one on at your church. Well, I hope that you guys are enjoying the Chick-fil-A. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming, everyone. I hope it's been encouraging so far. We're going to have a discussion with Idaho State Representative Brent Crane, a Republican out of Nampa. What district are you in?
District 13.
District 13. And I'll ask him a few questions, and then we'll open it up to you guys. We'll have an open Q&A. Just please come and use the mic when you come to ask your question. And anything's fair game, right?
Anything's fair game. Yep, we serve you, so.
Oh, we'll do the question and answer after we do a quick dialogue between the two of us.
Okay.
But
I like your enthusiasm.
I like
though.
it.
It's great. I like questions, so. Okay.
All right. So, Representative Crane, you grew up in a political family. For those who don't know, Representative Crane's dad served in office for a couple decades. What's your story, and how did your upbringing shape your political philosophy?
I can still remember the day vividly that I was in school. We went to a small Christian school. My mom was a teacher's aide there at the school, and she ran in and grabbed me out of the classroom, grabbed my sister and other sister and said, "Come on, we've got to go to the Capitol building." We had never been to the Capitol building before. She said, "Your dad has just been appointed to fill a vacant legislative seat that was vacated by somebody that had died." And so, here I'm an 8-year-old kid going over to the Capitol building for the first time and watching my father get sworn in. He went on to serve 16 years in the Idaho House of Representatives, and then he served as the state treasurer for 20 years in the state of Idaho. And so from 8 years old on, I always helped my father on his campaigns. And I actually enjoyed the campaign side of the business, as we call it. I really enjoy getting to be able to go out and talk to constituents and find out what's on their heart and on their mind. And so by the time I was 12, I was running his campaigns. And my dad was very good about volunteering me to help out with his political friends that were running for statewide office. "Oh, my son will put up your signs," or "My son will organize the door-to-door stuff." And as a kid, I didn't think that much about it because I enjoyed it. And so I knew by the age of 15 that this is what I wanted to do. And we happen to have a family business, and so it allows me the opportunity to be able to serve in the legislature and still generate income. We get about $17,000 a year for our service in the legislature. So here I'm going to Boise State, graduate in 2005, and Dolores Crow was a long-serving representative from Nampa, and she came up to me in February, and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, this is February 2006, I am not going to run for re-election, and I want you to run for my seat." And I said, "Okay." So we started the process of, forming the campaign, putting the committee together. And I ran against the newspaper publisher in town, who was also the former president of the Chamber of Commerce, who had ran against Representative Crow 2 years prior and only lost by a couple hundred votes. So he thought he was going to win. I remember being at a public forum, and he stood up and he said, "I had no idea I was running against the entire Republican Party when I decided to run for this race." He said, "Everybody is endorsing this kid," I was 32 years old, Brent Crane. And the reason being, and now that you see God's hand on your life, what my father was doing when I was 12 years old and on, from 12 to 32, so that 20-year period, God was using that as a training ground for me to develop relationships with other political people. And so when I ran for office and I started asking people, "Would you endorse me? Would you allow me to, put signs up in your sign locations?" The answer was yes. And so got elected and have served in the House of Representatives now for 15 years and absolutely love serving the people of Nampa.
You're a Christian legislator.
Yes.
you have Christian convictions. How do you apply your biblical worldview to the work that you do? And how does your politics and your faith intersect?
So, as a Christian lawmaker, a lot of the issues that we deal with are not religious in nature. So I'm going to give you an example. We decided to lower our tax rate from 6.9 down to 6.7. Does God really care? No. Is it terrible that it's at 7% in another state? No. So those are not the issues where your faith is truly tested or your faith is on display as a Christian lawmaker. Where your faith intersects with politics is on the social issues, the abortion, the gay rights, those type of issues where you begin to see your faith playing out. And I can remember being a freshman lawmaker, and a senior member came up to me and she said, "Hey, I've got an abortion bill that I'm running. I understand you're interested in abortion legislation. Would you mind to take the lead on this particular piece of legislation?" And I said, "No, I'd be happy to." And it was legislation that would allow a woman, if they're going to use an ultrasound when they perform an abortion, if they're going to do that, which most of the doctors do for litigation purposes, that you had to give the woman the right to view an ultrasound image of her baby. So I'm telling my wife about this, and hey, this is what we're planning on running. And I said, I just don't know what to term the bill. I don't know what to say. She goes, "Why don't you call it a woman's right to view?" She goes, "You tell me how a Democrat's going to stand up or a pro-choice person's going to stand up on the floor and defend that." And consequently, that's what we did name it. It was successful, and it passed. But the important part of that story was that senior lawmaker said, she said, "I want you to run this bill so you can get engaged in the abortion fight." And she said, "I will tell you, though, you will experience spiritual darkness." In my church, I go to Grace Bible Church in Nampa on Lone Star, just a non-denominational church, been there over 20 years. We don't talk a lot about spiritual warfare. So I didn't know a lot about spiritual warfare. And I remember coming home as the bill was moving its way through the process. And I'm not a hi. I'm not one of these guys that's going to get up here and rah the troops, but I'm also not going to be the Debbie Downer either. I'm just kind of an even-keeled dude. I tell people I'm kind of a boring guy. I'm just, what you see is what you get. And I remember coming home one day from the Capitol and going straight to bed. And my wife came in and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just down. I'm exhausted, I'm down." My wife was tuned in enough to know what was going on, and she called the prayer chain at our church. And she said, "This is what Brent is doing, and would you guys please begin to pray?" And I kid you not, it was literally like a wall. It stopped and began to move back. So it was at that point, as a young lawmaker, that I realized the importance of what we do and how those issues, those social issues, are spiritual battles more than they are physical battles. And that's where I see my faith intersect more often than not, Blaine, is in the social arena.
I'll never forget one story that you told me where you had the executive director for Planned Parenthood in your office. And I'm going to butcher what you said, and then you can correct me, but something like you told the executive director, "You guys are going to lose this issue, and you're going to lose this issue because the ultrasound has provided a window into the woman's womb and proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that preborn child, so clearly you can see that preborn child is human."
Yeah, I'm unique. A lot of my colleagues will not talk to the opposition, especially on social issues. I do. I feel like as a Christian, it's our obligation. And I actually enjoy the conversation. They're human beings as well. And so I have made friends with every person that has come in as an executive director for Planned Parenthood. I always invite them into my office, and routinely they will stop by to see me and to talk. Incidentally, 2 of those executive directors came from my high school, a Christian high school. And I just told my superintendent about this about 2 weeks ago. We were talking about the impact of education on kids. And I said, "Do you realize that 2 of the executive directors for Planned Parenthood here in Idaho came from our high school?" He's like, "What?" I had no idea. Somehow, They got off track. But anyways, I always take the opportunity to sit down and talk with them. And we talk about life. We truly do. We talk about life. And then we talk about the issue of life, now pro-life issues. And this particular individual is wanting to know what legislation I knew was coming up this year, and so I told her. And then I said, you're going to lose this issue. I'm convinced you're going to lose this issue because you guys have been purporting a narrative that is false. And that narrative is that it's just a clump of cells or it's tissue. But the ultrasound and technology, now we're up to 4D, window into the womb. I said women are able to actually see, and they now know that the lie that you have been telling them is false, that it's not just a clump of tissue or it's a clump of cells. That is actually a beating heart. It's actually a live body, and it has a never-dying soul. And so I said, you are going to lose. And I truly believe that. There is a generation of kids that are coming up now that are very active politically on the life issue and very effective on the life issue. And I believe we're going to see Roe overturned. I really do, because it's becoming an issue that they can't defend anymore.
One of the issues that comes through the committee that you chair in the House, State Affairs Committee, is sexual orientation and gender identity. And almost every year, there's a bill introduced. It's called Add the Words here in Idaho, Add the Words, and it purports to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Why should Christians be concerned about this effort to amend our civil rights law in the state to include those categories of sexual orientation and gender identity?
Well, let me give you maybe a little history on it too. I want to say, guys, it was 2014-15, somewhere in there, we decided to finally have a hearing, a full hearing in the House of Representatives, State Affairs Committee, on this issue of adding the words sexual orientation, gender identity, or SOGI is the other term that it gets called. It was the longest hearing in state history. State Affairs meets every single morning. We typically will go in for an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning. We did that, and then after we would go to our afternoon sessions and afternoon committees, we would come back each evening and have a hearing and listen to citizens tell us why we should or should not have, we call it SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, added to the Human Rights Code. And I remember sitting through that hearing, I actually, a number of those folks I met with and talked to. And one of the things that they did not understand is that in Idaho, we can fire an employee. So this kid right here, he's got the Idaho State University. I'm a Bronco fan. You're working for me, and let's just say I'm a passionate Boise State fan. I can fire you if I want because you're Idaho State University. I don't like Idaho State University. I remember sitting across my desk telling that to one of these individuals. They're like, you've got to pass this because as a transgender individual, this is going to protect my right to work. I said, no, it's not. I said, do you think an employer in the state of Idaho that has an objection to your lifestyle is going to fire you for your lifestyle? There's no way. Not in a social media world. You'll blow them up. I said, they're going to make up some other excuse, and they're going to fire you for something else. They had not been told that. They had absolutely no idea. But why does a Christian businessman or a Christian organization have concerns about SOGI? A church takes a stand, says we believe God's word says that marriage is between one man and one woman. That's it. It's not man on man, it's not woman on woman, it's not threesomes, etc. If you take that position and SOGI's in place and someone comes to apply for a job at the church, you could be at risk of losing your status to continue on as a church or as a university or a Christian organization. And so that's the concern. The other concern is that as a Christian businessman, maybe you go to a church that's what that is taught from your church platform. And this individual knows that. And you fire somebody for good cause. Maybe they didn't show up to work that day, and it's a pattern, and you've met with them, and you say, hey, I'm going to have to let you go. That person, if they went to the Human Rights Commission, could file a complaint against the business and say, I know that my employer believes that marriage is only between one man and one woman. The reason they really fired me was not because I didn't show up, it's because of my lifestyle. And in court, that would be pretty tough for you to defend your position because on the stand, under the oath, they're going to ask you, what do you believe? Yeah, that's what I believe. Is that what your church teaches? Yeah, that's what my church teaches. So that's why I think Christian businesses and Christian organizations need to be concerned about SOGI legislation. And the other thing is, it's not going to protect individuals that is their lifestyle. It is not going to protect them because business owners aren't going to fire them for that reason.
One other thing that we've seen in other states that have passed SOGI type legislation, or like what Add the Words would do here in Idaho, is Christian schools who are trying to hire Christian teachers who abide by a certain statement of faith. And you have a teacher who is living a homosexual lifestyle or who transitions to the other gender socially, and the school says, well, we can't have you teaching here. You agreed to the statement of faith. A SOGI law, or Add the Words, would prevent the Christian school from taking disciplinary action against that employee. Same with churches as well. Some states have carve-outs for churches, most don't. And if you want volunteers that are abiding by your church's statement of faith, if a SOGI law is in place, it really ties the hands of what you can do in terms of hiring and firing, in terms of volunteers, etc. So there are many concerns with SOGI, and I think it's going to be an issue that will be perennial in Idaho politics for the foreseeable future. Every single year, one of these bills are introduced, and we have to keep fighting back against it.
Yep. And it's, I remember the hearing really well. I didn't know a lot about transgender. I did not know that there is a gender spectrum. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you can move back and forth on that gender spectrum. I learned that in the hearing, that one day you could identify as a guy, and at another point you can identify as a girl, and then you can come back to a guy. I didn't know that that's possible. I remember a colleague of mine from northern Idaho saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What does LGBTQIA stand for? And it started out as LGBT, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, LGBTQ, queer, I, intersect, A, asexual, and they just keep adding on to it. And so it becomes difficult from a policy perspective, and this is one of the things that I would talk with them about. I think it's fair to have a discussion with a member of the transgender community. Tell me how this is going to play out in a school where, let's say maybe you're the PE teacher, and you identify as a guy, and 2 weeks later you identify as a girl. So now it's appropriate for you to go into the girls' locker room. And then you've decided after a couple of months you're not enjoying that. You want to transition back to a guy, and now you want to go into the guys' restroom or the guys' locker room. These are the policy decisions that we have to make, and this is the difficulty. And when you would sit down and explain that to them and say, so what would be your solution? They never had thought about it. A lot of them are like, well, I never thought. Because most of them will transition from guy to girl or girl to guy, and they stay there. But a lot of them don't. And so when you help them, again, so I think the importance of having the dialogue with people that you disagree with is you can help them begin to understand your concerns on a particular policy position.
So one of the issues that I talked about earlier today is the issue of school bathrooms. So let's segue there. You know that the Idaho School Boards Association earlier this year sent out a memo to their member school districts telling those school districts that they legally have to allow boys and girls bathrooms, boys and girls locker rooms, boys and girls showers, boys staying with the girls on overnight field trips. Is this something that the legislature needs to take care of? And how would you respond to the objection that we need to let school districts take care of this issue for local control purposes?
So do we need to deal with it? Yes, we do. And I was glad to see Christian Welp here today. I'm going to digress just for a bit, but I'll answer your question. Christian Welp, Catholic Diocese of Idaho, and Blaine Kanzati have formed a fantastic pro-family alliance that is very effective in the state of Idaho in getting legislation passed. And I remember Representative Batt and I talking about how we needed an organization that could come alongside pro-family Christian lawmakers and help represent those positions in a powerful way. We actually committed to pray about it. And my wife and I had lunch Thursday with former Representative Batt and her husband, and we talked about this relationship that God brought together between Blaine Canzati and Christian Welp, and they've been very effective in getting things done. So it's an answer to my prayers personally. But I'm saying that to say that yesterday I met with Senator Lodge, who chairs the State Affairs Committee in the Senate, my counterpart, who I have to work with in order to move legislation. And she said, Crane, we've got a couple of things we've got to deal with, and one of them was this particular issue of the bathrooms. And she said, I have met with Blaine and I've met with Christian. I want to get something done on that this year. And I said, good, so do I. So we will be bringing legislation forward to try to deal with that issue. I think the second part of your question was, how do you deal with the issue of local control? That is a very strong argument in the Idaho legislature. Should those local school board trustees be able to determine what they want in their local school district? Sometimes they should, absolutely. However, on an issue like access to locker rooms and bathrooms, it's probably wise to deal with it on a statewide issue because these kids go into other schools when they're playing sports. And so how would you deal with the tension? I'm just going to pick on a couple of school districts here. Let's say you've got Nampa School District. We're playing guys from Boise School District. We have two different positions on this particular issue. Who's right? Who wins? And so that way, probably from a statewide perspective, just saying, hey, so that there is certainty and predictability for parents, for coaches, and for athletes as they move across the state and play, we feel like it's probably going to be better to deal with that as a statewide policy. So that's how I would answer that.
One thing I tell legislators all the time is that the school districts are actually the creation of the state. The school districts have been created by the state. This is not an issue of federalism, right? And as conservatives, we really like federalism. We really like local control. We really like subsidiarity. But when we're talking about the state and the federal government, you have two separate jurisdictions that are in many ways equal jurisdictions, right? Two sovereign states. You have Idaho and the federal government. And if the federal government begins to tell Idaho what to do, when it comes to Idaho's jurisdiction, that's a problem. If Idaho tells the federal government what to do when it comes to the federal government's jurisdiction, that's a problem as well. When you're talking about school districts, school district does not have its own jurisdiction naturally. A school district is created by the state. The bounds of its jurisdiction are set by the state. And if the school district begins to do things that the state doesn't like, the state has total authority, rightly, to tell the school district, no, you can't do that. We're going to restrict you in this area. So, I'm all for federalism. I'm a big constitutionalist. I believe in the system that our founding fathers set up. This issue is not an issue of federalism. Representative Crane, the last time that I talked with you was just after the Idaho hospital systems had put their vaccine mandates in place. And they had not yet been implemented, but they had been announced. And you told me, Blaine, watch this. You're going to have problems at the hospitals providing care because you're going to have all these people resign. The hospitals were denying that was going to happen, and then they denied that it did happen, and then they blamed it on a COVID surge. In many ways, I think you've probably felt vindicated in publicly taking that stance. How do we deal with the vaccine issue? And obviously, you guys are coming back to session in just, not just a few days to hopefully take care of this issue. What should we do, and how do we deal with it?
The 15th of November, we're going to go back. The House is going back into session. The bulk of these bills will come through my committee. If it's a business-to-business relationship, it's going to go to the business committee. If it has some judicial overtones to it, it's going to go to judiciary. But the speaker has warned me. He said, look, the bulk of these will come to your committee. You know how to deal with them. Just get done what we need to get done. I will tell you there is probably 15 to 20 bills out there on how to deal with it. People are creative. And it's one of the things I enjoy about the legislative process is you see that creativity play out. I just feel, and I'm a business owner, I don't feel like it's right for me as an employer to tell my employees, you take this shot or you're going to get fired. Just personally, it rubs me the wrong way. I have friends on the other side, however, that say, look, this is my private business. I should be able to run that business however I want to run that business. And why should the government get involved between that relationship that I have with my employees? And I argue back, well, we have a business committee in the House of Representatives, and we do that every single day. We tell people that the employer can only have his or her employee work 40 hours, or they have to pay them overtime. For the last 4 years, I have been leading a fight to change the apprentice to journeyman ratio for electricians. You can only have currently 1 journeyman electrician and 4 helpers or apprentices on the job at a time. And it used to be 1 to 2, now it's 1 to 4. We've got it at 1 to 4. I'm like, you're right there. You're already injecting yourself into that relationship. Why shouldn't that business owner then be able to decide if he wants 1 journeyman and 500 on the job site? Why should he make that determination? Well, safety. I said, look, we inject ourselves all the time. That's what government does. And I think in this case, the employer has all the leverage. The employee does not have the leverage. And in the case of the healthcare, what really made me mad is St. Luke's, St. Al's, and Primary Health all made their press releases happen the exact same day. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist guy. I'm not. But I'm also not stupid. Yeah. There was collusion that happened. Yeah. They talked about it. We're going to release ours this date. Yeah, we'll release ours. And I called them on it. And consequently, St. Luke's asked if I would come down and tour their COVID wing in downtown Boise, and I did. It was the most uncomfortable legislative meeting I have had after that tour. I've never walked away from a meeting between me and someone else. I didn't walk away from that meeting, but it was one of the times I considered walking away. It was rude. It was absolutely rude. You and I don't have to agree, but I need to treat you with respect. And this is what I had to tell him. And you need to treat me with respect. We're human beings. We may approach the problem from a different perspective, but we've got to be respectful. And it was anything but respectful. They have, I will tell you, because of the pushback that Take a Stand Now, group of nurses that knew nothing about politics, organized, because of their efforts and legislative pushback, they have honored 95% of the religious exemptions. And that's all I want them to do. That's a First Amendment right. Honor that First Amendment right for a person to exercise their faith inside the workplace environment. So they've done a decent job. We've got a bigger problem, though, in southeastern Idaho. I don't know if any of you guys know about the Idaho Engineering Laboratory. Idaho is in the forefront in nuclear waste, as nuclear research, as well as cybersecurity. It's one of the missions of the INL. It's a federal program out there. They admitted to me face-to-face that they were actively denying their employees religious exemptions. And if you took the vaccine shot, you had to sign a waiver that you would hold harmless the Idaho Engineering Laboratory. And I told them, I said, both those are violations of law. I said, you realize the discrimination for hiring, you cannot discriminate based on sex, religion, etc. I said, I want people of faith to have assurance that they can express their faith inside the workplace. And if they have an objection to a policy, that First Amendment right is protected. I got a text message from them this week. They have now honored 30% of the religious exemptions. But one of their top employees out there with regards to nuclear security, he had to resign because they wouldn't honor it. And so we've got a lot of work to do when we come in the 15th. I'm supposed to go on vacation the 16th for 2 weeks with my family to Florida. We've had our tickets bought for months, and I told my wife this morning, I said, I don't know what to do. Sure, I can appoint someone to fill in for me, but I said, I don't think this fight is going to be over on the 18th, which is what everybody's predicting. It's a very complex issue, but strong feelings in the House. We will pass most vaccine mandate legislation. We will tell employers and stuff, you don't have a right to do that. We don't know where the Senate's going to be at in this process, and the governor has not told us his position yet, definitively, what his position is. So I told her, I said, maybe we ought to look at going in December instead of November. So we'll see how it turns out.
We have about 10 minutes for Q&A if people want to come up to the mic and ask Representative Crane some questions.
To segue off of your recent statement here. These businesses, whether it's St. Luke's, St. Al's, but other businesses that have over 100 employees, requiring their employees to take this injection, which is still under the emergency use authorization, even though Pfizer got FDA approved, that approved version is not available. Can the legislature here protect individuals that don't want to take this jab? And if they're being, I mean, the religious exemption, is that like a religious test? You go before HR, an attorney, and you declare what your religious position is? I mean, I've heard of some instances where people have to come in monthly to reaffirm their religious thoughts and beliefs. And I just want to know if there is something in the works to protect that, because it really does seem like a basic First Amendment violation. Thank you.
I have lunch with fellow lawmakers about every 3 weeks, sometimes once a month. We met yesterday for lunch. Just in that little small group of about 6 of us that were there, there's a myriad of ideas of how to solve that problem. Montana has a statute on the books that I like, and Representative Skog from Nampa has drafted that Montana statute. There is Representative Mordaunt, who was there yesterday. She has an exemption for religion, but also philosophical reasons as well. Or, you know, she's like, hey, one of the issues that we're wrestling with on that one is, and it's a fair argument. I felt like it's a fair argument. When I met with the INL, they said to me, do you believe someone who isn't an active member of their church can claim a religious exemption? I said, no. I feel like that you need to be an active member of your church. They're like, Brent, if you have just somebody that goes to church on Christmas and Easter, is that okay with you if they say, oh, this is my religious exemption? For me personally, it's not. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I think a religious exemption, you need to be a member practicing your faith. I don't believe, on the other hand, you should be requiring of employees to come monthly or yearly to prove that. And as I told the INL, I said, you have to understand the way that the courts have determined this, it's a sincerely held religious belief. Why did they use the term sincerely held? The church that I go to, I don't agree with everything at my church. I agree with most of what is taught at my church. And the things that we disagree on, they're not spine issues. They're not super important issues. I'll give you an example. I prefer more hymns. My church sings more contemporary, right? But am I going to lead my church over that? No. And when I relayed that information to the INL, they're like, we never thought about that. I said, yeah. I said, so it's sincerely held because that's my belief. It's personal. Because what they were wrestling with is the LDS Church and the Catholic Church has come out and said, we support vaccine mandates. And I said, just because the cardinal says that, or just because the local bishop says that, or the quorum of 12 say that, I said, one thing I've learned about the LDS people is I said, they still have some sincerely held religious beliefs, and you need to honor that. So that's a long way around it, but yes, there is legislation to deal with it.
Any other questions?
It's nice that you guys are talking about this subject of vaccination and everything. And I have been active in writing my representatives. One of the things that disturbs me greatly is when I get the impression that they're not really listening to what I'm saying. And when I get responses that poo-poo what I'm saying as being conspiracy information, like their sources are the truth, when it doesn't scientifically, A doesn't equal A anymore, and yet they're telling us that we need to believe them and just trust them. I have a real problem with the Republican Party in this aspect. I'm really angry about it because they're lying to us. And I'm ticked off,
Okay?
okay? Especially when I know that when you've had the COVID, you're better protected than any sort of stupid vaccine that they can come up with. And yet, you've got to get the poke, or you can't go there, or you can't do this, or can't go, okay? That's the kind of rot that we're getting from our government. What do you say about that? I mean, how do you take and deal with your representative that, hello?
Perfect. I was hoping this question would come up. I'm serious. I really am. I'm dead serious. I love Q&A. I absolutely love Q&A. Go to God's word. What does he say? Love your enemies. Do good to them. Pray for them.
About that too.
I understand.
I'm ticked off, and I don't know how to take and
Okay.
get around that.
Let me answer here. God had to teach me this lesson. I grew up in a political family. I understand how politics works. But he had to teach me that ultimately he is sovereign. And he is in control. And he has commanded us to love. Jesus commanded us to love our enemies. Do good to them which persecute you, and pray for them. He also says in Proverbs, I control the heart of a king in my hands, and I can turn it wherever I want it to go. But what activates the hand of God? Our prayer. Prayer is our key. What does he say in 2 Chronicles 7:14? If my people, that's us, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then what? I will hear from heaven and heal their land. So how do you deal with this? I can't stress enough, you have to bathe it in prayer. Second of all, I understand the frustration. I don't want to minimize your frustration. It's real. You will attract more friends with gracious speech than you will with frustration. So it's okay to be frustrated. Deal with your frustration out and away from the political process. But when you go to that political process, whether it's the Capitol building, whether it's an email to your senator or your representative, if you've got to write the nasty email first, the angry, to get it out, and I've done that before. I'll write it, and then I'll set, then I'll erase it and write what needs to be written. I can tell you personally, and the conversations that happen behind the scenes, we get horrific emails. I've had my wife threatened to be raped, my kids to be murdered. I've had my home egged, my fence tagged. We've had it all. None of that persuades an individual to change their mind. In fact, most often what happens is we become more resolute in our position. So make sure your approach is bathed in prayer and then go graciously. The other thing to do is develop a relationship with your lawmaker. Ask to take them out for coffee. Ask to take them out to lunch and get to know them. It's much easier when you know them in one-on-one and you have a relationship with them. Most of the people that serve over there, most of them are good people. Not all, but most of them are. They may have bad information. So I prayed about how to have this conversation today, and I prayed I wanted this question to come up because it's something that's missing in our political dialogue today. And more often than not, we get the angry arrows instead of the loving approach. I get far more angry emails, yelling emails, than I do people saying, I'm praying for you and thank you for what you did. So anyways, next
Thanks.
question.
Yep. We got time for, we'll do two more if you can keep your question really brief.
Yes, myself and my family are brand new to this area. We're from the LA area, and coming in here, we know nothing about local and state political issues. So my simple question is, where do I become an informed citizen?
So, a couple of things. First of all, Family Policy Alliance is get on their mailing list.
Idaho Family Policy Center.
I'm sorry. He's changed the name. Idaho Family Policy Center. Get on his mailing list because he will send those issues to you. Your local Republican Party. Start attending. Are you in Ada County or Canyon County? Or? Canyon. Oh, great. You're in Canyon County. Okay. So get involved in the local Canyon County Republican Party. Go to the city council. Watch the city council meetings. Come over to the legislature. And then whatever district you live in, just say, hey, I'm new to the area. I'd like to know if I could sit down and have coffee with you. Rick Hogeboom is here. Rick and I became friends through that very method. He's just like, want to get to know my legislator. And that's how we became friends. So, yeah, we're human beings too.
We'll kind of tag off of that. If I am not in your district.
Oh, no.
And I know. So is it more important for me to get to know my legislature, or are you as a group specifically elected by your district and then serve the entire state? Would I bring issues to you? Would I bring them to my representative? How would that logistically
Great question.
work best?
So, no, you need to know your local representative. We get hundreds of emails. I will tell you, most of us filter them down to folks that are in our district. And if you're going to send an email, sending an email to the entire 70 members of the House doesn't do any good. Those ones go in the trash. Send it to your local representative. Now, having said that, Blaine knows that if he's going to move social policy, I don't think you live in my district, do you?
No.
Okay. He knows if he's going to move social policy, though, it goes through my committee. So he will have a relationship with me, or if someone, a pro-life organization has something they want to move, they will then have a relationship with me. So if there's an issue like that that's important to you, that you want to see move, then you want to get to know the chairman, typically of that committee, because they're going to determine that. But the influence that you can have on your local lawmaker, I cannot stress it, in Idaho still, we have a very low power differential between lawmaker and citizen, meaning we're very accessible. And most of us love to meet with our constituents for a cup of coffee or lunch or whatever. But go there with the intent of getting to know them first. I have so many friends in politics, and I will tell you, it's one of the things that I don't like about politics. I'm thankful that God gave me a set of true friends that are still my friends today, that just because you're in politics, it hasn't changed your relationship. The minute you get elected, you have thousands of friends, and they're tugging at you all the time. So make sure the relationship is genuine and you're there just to get to know them before you start making a request of them.
Our legislators are really approachable in this state, and it's worthwhile to get to know them. It's worthwhile to contact them. You know, I interned in Congress, and I got all the nasty letters from the people emailing their congressman, "You're not listening to me, you know, don't send me back this form email." That's not the case with our state legislature. You know, for some issues, the less politicized issues, the less hot button issues, if a legislator gets 10 or 20 emails, that's a good showing. And so if you guys are sending emails to your legislators, you can really make a difference. If you're getting to know your legislators, you can make a bigger difference. Yep. They're approachable. It's worth it. We'll take one more quick question because we're over time.
I was hoping he didn't know the difference between 2 and 3, like male and female. I was like, I'm good. Okay, so to clarify with the whole religious exemption statement and sincerely held religious beliefs, all that, were you saying that you think you have to be attending a church or being really active to get that exemption?
Personally. So my wife and I disagree on this.
Oh, okay, well then I'm good.
She goes, look, what if someone comes to know the Lord? She goes, what if they just get saved?
Yeah.
She goes, Brent, you're cutting them out. I said, yeah, but by and large, I'm talking the majority, the 90% of these. I said, I really think that someone needs to be a member of a faith community. Because what was happening is people were all of a sudden getting religion. Mm-hmm. That's a problem. To me, that's an abuse of a religious exemption. That's why Representative DeMordon's bill that says religious exemption and philosophical would take care of them. Yeah. And I think that that's a better way to go. Add both those exemptions, and then you take care of the person that's maybe a nominal Christian or maybe someone who is just getting religion, just
Or
to get the exemption.
backslidden and
Right.
has sincerely held beliefs, but
Right,
they're
but it's how do you have
Absolutely.
my argument was how do you back to her? I mean, my wife and I, she loves politics, so we talk. This is what we do, and I said, how do you say though it's sincerely held
Yeah.
if you go to church just on Christmas and Easter? It's not really sincerely held.
Well, it can be.
It could be,
But yeah, no,
but
I
9
like
times
that.
out of 10 it's not. Yep.
His-
So
so-
you're taking my wife's position.
The courts have
We'll
ruled-
have her up here next time. It will be much better. She is outgoing, friendly, and beautiful, so it would be much better if she were here.
The courts have ruled on this issue over and over again, and for you to qualify for a religious exemption under case law, it's very difficult if the church that you are a member of does not actually oppose the vaccines in their official doctrine. So the philosophical exemption is kind of, another way, still a sincerely held belief. It's not a question of whether it's a sincerely held belief. It's another way to get the exemption if your church has not explicitly taken a stance on this issue, because it's really hard to win in court with a religious exemption if your church has not. So just something to keep in mind. Thank you guys so much. Thank Representative Crane. Trash bags are in the back for your lunches, and we'll be back in just a few minutes for the next panel discussion.